What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm going to be bringing you the Season 1, Episode 1 review of Tron Uprising, entitled Becks Beginning. And first, before I get into this, let me give a shout out to my man Manga Reader Z, who yesterday uploaded his review of Tron Uprising Episode 1. And in all actuality, I had seen this cartoon before. I had seen some previous advertisements of this cartoon before, but I had totally forgot about it. And I really wasn't intending to do a review of it, but when Manga Reader Z praised it so much, I decided to download it and then do my review of it. Basically, I'm jacking his swagger. Yes. But anyway, this episode was more like a prologue than a true episode 1. I believe the premiere date for this series is actually June 7th at 9 p.m. I believe, because 9 a.m. on a weekday wouldn't make much sense, or maybe it would because it's summer, but I believe it's 9 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. 9 p.m. Thursday night. So June 7th premiere. And let me tell you, this looks absolutely awesome. Great. Stunning. So let me get into my review of this. First, let's talk about the aesthetics. The aesthetics are beautiful. Just downright beautiful. The colors, the array of colors, the display of colors, the vibrancy of the colors. Just, it's really breathtaking. And what makes it so much more remarkable is that not Tron, but the grid, which is where the story takes place, has no lighting. There's no sun. So everything is sort of shrouded in darkness. All of the backgrounds are sort of shrouded in darkness. And what happens is you get this juxtaposition of the black background, the dark background, with very, very bright colors. And it just looks absolutely fabulous. It looks stunning. And they also employed a technique where they're combining 2D animation with CGI animation. And it looks very, very fluid. You can sort of tell when it transitions from one to the other, when it transitions from, for example, 2D to CGI or vice versa. But the fluidity of the transitions is just, it's beautiful. I love the way they've sort of integrated these two aspects of animation. One thing I didn't like about the drawing, though, is the body structure. And I'm pretty sure that this is just one of my pet peeves, and maybe you guys aren't too worried about this. But the bodies don't have proper proportions. And I know that may seem awkward because this is a cartoon. Of course, the bodies won't have proper proportions. But just for me personally, the arms and the legs are just too lengthy. They're just too long. And it's not that I don't, I watch anime and manga. I watch cartoons. They're all sort of abstractions of real human bodies. So it's not as if I don't like improper body proportions. But this just makes the characters look really, really awkward. And my suspicion for why they made their arms and legs so lengthy is because they wanted to sensationalize and to better depict the acrobatics and the choreography, because the choreography and the acrobatics are also great. Another thing I like about the aesthetics are the gadgets that they use. I love the gadgets in Tron. It's just, I love it. And I really love science fiction, so of course I would love the gadgets. But the gadgets in Tron have sort of visual digital effects, and it's hard to explain if you haven't seen it. But there's one scene, for example, where Beck goes to fix a bike, and he uses this device because everything inside of the grid is a computer program. So he has this device that allows you to see the sort of computer program that makes up an object, and he can sort of put his hand into the computer program and fix it. Very, very cool visual effects. I love it. Also, the disc games, or the sort of disc fights that Tron is sort of famous for, really love those. Like I said, the choreography, the integration of the choreography and the visual effects and all the colors are just it's just ridiculous. It's amazing. I really, really love it. And there's one disc fight in particular that happens in this sort of prologue episode, and that's the fight between Beck and Brody. And they really outdid themselves. And you can tell that they really studied this choreography and really were looking for the great way the best way rather to use 2D animation and CGI to really bring these fights to life. And I really like what they've done with this aesthetically. And the music too. The music is fucking boss, man. And actually the same person who scored Tron Legacy, which has a beast ass soundtrack with Daft Punk. Whoa. Even if you don't like Tron Legacy, the movie, just get the soundtrack. The soundtrack is good. But anyway, the same person who scored Tron Legacy is actually scoring Tron Uprising, which is awesome. Always a plus. And I love electronic music. I don't know if Daft Punk is doing any music for this series, but I just love electronic music in general. So like Daft Punk, Skrillex, all awesome. And especially the fight scenes. The music during the fight scenes is just adds just that extra layer of intensity to everything. Pretty awesome. So to give you a sort of summary and analysis of the episode starts off with a very succinct explanation of what's going on. And I haven't seen the original Tron. I'm not sure how many movies came out before Tron Legacy, which was in movie theaters, I think maybe a couple years ago. But I haven't seen those original movies, so my knowledge is somewhat limited. But you don't need all the knowledge of previous films to know what's going on here, because like I said, they give you a very succinct explanation of what's going on. So basically what happened is that there's this computer programmer named Flynn, and he wanted to create the perfect computer program. So what he did was he created a program known as the grid. And the grid is described as being a digital sort of computer program that has infinite possibilities. And Flynn what he managed to do was to digitize himself and put himself inside of the grid, which, as I said before, is a computer program. And what he did once he was inside that computer program is to create a digital copy of himself. And this digital copy of himself was known as Clue. And what Flynn also did was he created another computer program named Tron. And Tron is described as having the role of keeping the computer program free and open. Because like I said, this is a computer program that's described as having infinite possibilities. And so Tron was tasked with keeping those infinite possibilities going, to keep the computer program or the grid open. But what happened was Clue betrayed Flynn and he betrayed Tron, and he took over the grid for himself. So Clue is something like a virus. He just started taking over the computer program, or he started taking over the grid. And so that's the beginning of the story. Now, that's the sort of backstory for all that's happening in Tron Uprising. The story that we get that begins with Beck, that story begins it's called In Medias Res. And basically what in medias res means is that it's a literary technique where the narrative starts in the middle or the end of the story. So what you get is a non-linear narrative. So the show starts off with Beck sort of imprisoned by Tron, and he's on his knees, he's got his hand behind his back, and his hands are sort of cuffed together, and he's engaging in this conversation with Tron. And as the conversation proceeds, we get to see that how Beck came to be in this situation. What happened was, and it's not all revealed to us all at once, but what happened is we see him falling out of the sky, and he lands and basically breaks the ground up. But everything's like a computer program, so it's not really the ground, but he breaks the ground up, and he gets captured by Tron, and Tron brings him back to his home. I call it a home because it's not quite really a home. But this conversation between Tron and Beck, after Tron has imprisoned Beck, becomes the impetus for the exploration of Beck's backstory, and really for the exploration of this prologue episode. And one thing that the narrative technique in medias res allows you to do is it allows you to speed the narrative up, which is very important in terms of pacing, because if you have a first episode, you want to get to the action as quick as possible. And also what happens is when they speed the pacing up in this prologue episode is that Beck is supposed to be, we already know from the synopsis, and you can read this on Wikipedia, Beck is supposed to become Tron's apprentice. So we already know that there's going to be some sort of relationship between Beck and Tron. What we learned throughout this prologue episode is that Beck is the protagonist and Tron is the deuteragonist. The deuteragonist is sort of like a secondary protagonist. They're generally known as sidekicks, which is sort of what Tron is to Beck. And then we get to learn Beck's backstory while Tron learns it as well. So Tron has Beck in prison, and Beck is telling him his story, and we get to sort of overhear that story. So it's sort of like the writers are killing two birds with one stone, because they have to explain the development of the relationship between Beck and Tron, and while they're doing that, we can also be let in on that story as well. So they don't have to do it twice. Another thing with this narrative technique is that Beck, we learn that Beck fulfills the role of a political revolutionary. And in political narratives, a person's ability to take control of their own story is always going to be paramount. It's always going to be of prime importance. And so from a philosophical and narrative standpoint, it's a way of affirming Beck's self-identity. It's a way of showing that he has a very strong sense of self and that he has a very strong commitment to freedom. And not just his freedom, but the freedom of other people as well. And this comes out very clearly when Beck avenges Brody's death. And yeah, this show is that serious. People actually die. People actually get killed in Tron Uprising. So it's a children's show, to be sure. It's a cartoon, but it also has a darker edge to it. So people, you know, my age can get into this story as well. So as Beck is telling his story to Tron, we learn that Beck is working as a mechanic, but then went renegade at some point. He decided to rebel versus Clue, which is the virus computer program that's trying to take over the grid. And what we learn is that General Tesla, who is, you know, a general in the army of Clue, he takes over Argon City, which is where Beck lives and works as a mechanic. And I'm not sure about the continuity of this, but it appears that Clue hasn't quite been able to take over the entire grid. So there is a possibility that there are other pockets of resistance around the grid, and that this might become an important facet of the story later on, but that's never revealed in this episode. That's just my speculation. But in the process of trying to take over Argon City, General Tesla kills Beck's friend, Bodhi. And Beck assumes, and in response to this, Beck assumes Tron's identity because everybody believes that Tron is dead. And so Beck assumes Tron's identity and he decides to fight back. And he blows up a statue of Clue. One of the proverbial moves of all political revolutionaries. If you're going against somebody with a lot of power, destroy something that they've created in their image. That's generally the way this goes. So what happens is Tesla dispatches Paige, who's like his field commander, you know, working under General Tesla, to go and find Beck, aka Tron. And so what happens is there's a very, very nice extended fight sequence that ensues between Beck and Paige. And Beck literally gets chased out of, well, Beck, who has the persona of Tron, gets chased out of the city, and he winds up in what's known as the Outlands. It's the area outside of the city. Basically like the wilderness, what we would kind of call a wilderness. And this is how Beck crashes into Tron's home. So what we learn is that Tron has been in exile ever since his fight with Clue. And we also learned that he was damaged pretty badly by Clue. I mean, Clue whooped his ass pretty badly. Damaged him so badly that now Tron has no chance of defeating Clue. And so after, like I said, after Beck crashes into his home, Tron places him in handcuffs and he starts questioning Beck. And what we learn is that he's testing him to see if he's worthy of becoming the next Tron. Because, like I said, Tron can no longer fight Clue, so he needs a sort of apprentice to fight for him. And there's this fight that ensues between Tron and Beck. And then Tron reveals his identity and explains that he needs Beck's help because Beck, like everybody else, has been thinking that Tron is has been killed by Clue. At least that's what Clue's been claiming all this time. And then Beck, but interestingly enough, Beck declines to help Tron to become Tron's apprentice because he doesn't think he has what it takes. And in his words, he's not that special. So Beck heads back to Argon City, and his actions have caused major problems in that city because we learn now that Tesla is ruling with the iron fist. And what he's doing is he's forcing the programs to fight in games. And of course, these games are bad. If you know anything about Tron, I at least know this much. The games are where it's like an arena type thing, like the Romans used to have, where you put people in an arena and you force them to fight each other until one kills the other. So this is what General Tesla is having the people of Argon City go through. And so Beck dons his Tron identity again and attempts to save them from being, forced to fight in these games. And the fight that ensues between General Tesla and Beck, nothing short of extraordinary. Especially Tesla has these sort of gauntlets that he wears, and they can sort of extend out. I mean, it's hard to explain, but it is just, it is great. It is a hell of a fight scene. And so Beck winds up being able to save his friends, although he kind of gets his ass beat by General Tesla in the process. But he does wind up saving his friends, but we quickly learn that it's a Pyrrhonic victory. In other words, he realizes that even though he saved his friends, General Tesla points out that there are people all over the city being sent to his games. So even if you've saved your friends, there's hundreds of other people who are going to die in my games. And so at the end of the episode, what we see is that Beck winds up going back to Tron to actually learn to, become the next Tron so that he can be his apprentice and save Argon City. So that's how things stand at the end of the first episode. And so my conclusions are this series is excellent. And I think I'm actually gonna be reviewing this because it looks really, really good. In terms of the themes, politics, freedom, revolution, political revolutionaries. It's got all of that. And there's even the possibility that Beck just won't be learning how to fight from Tron, but that he'll become a sort of warrior philosopher type figure, that he'll actually gain some political insight. He'll learn about political ideology. And like I said, the visuals are just beautiful, stunning, awesome music. It's a very, very good narrative, nice pacing. And it has was very interesting for, I think, a children's show, is that it has a complex assortment of narrative roles being played by multiple characters. So Beck, I've already mentioned, is the protagonist. Tron is the deuteragonist. He's the sort of, secondary protagonist, the sort of ancillary figure. General Tesla is the main villain of the series, but Clue, ironically enough, who's the one trying to take over the grid, is playing the role of secondary villain. Is playing the role of secondary villain in this series. So it has a very, very nice assortment of characters who fulfill a lot of different character roles, a lot of different narrative roles, and I really like that about this series so far. And just one prediction or speculation that I have. I predict that Tron will die at some point, and that Beck will have to take over and really subsume the role of being Tron. And so that's just my prediction and my speculation from the outset. But like I said, overall, I think this is a beast-ass cartoon show. I think to compare this a little bit to Legend of Korra, which is on Nickelodeon, this is on Disney. I think Legend of Korra is better than Tron, at least from what I've seen so far, but Tron Uprising is nothing to scoff at. It's a great series. It looks like it's going to be a great series in its own right. So this was your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.